Good day and hello. My name is Mike Neidiger and I'm an associate professor at Spring Arbor University. I'm humbled that Professor Caleb Chan asked me to give this lecture and this talk to you fine folks. What I'm standing before you, what's between you and me is a big piece of plexiglass. You may wonder, why am I standing in front of this great big piece of plexiglass? Well, Caleb Chan wanted me to talk to you about this. And what you see here is you see a light board. All right, so there's a big, huge piece of plexiglass in front of you. And the reason he wanted me to speak to you about this is I incorporate this into my teaching classes. A little bit before we go on about myself is that I'm originally from the great state of Iowa, in the heart of the Midwest in the United States of America. I now live in Michigan, and as I stated, I teach at Spring Arbor University. I teach chemistry and I teach physics as well. I got my doctorate at the University of Iowa in physical chemistry, studying what's called four-wave mixing or 2D IR spectroscopy. I am starting my 4th year at Spring Arbor University, and I'm very happy and amazingly blessed that God would bring me here and allow me to teach chemistry and physics to these students. And as I stated, I am humbled that Professor Caleb Chan asked me to talk to you folks about this and how I incorporate it into my lectures. So what you see here now is you see a piece of plexiglass. The size is going to be about 48 inches wide and almost about 48 inches tall. And how I use this is I actually write on this with markers. So I have a whole slew of markers here. And what you'll see is that the image it glows, it starts to glow. And how I use this is I use this in distance learning. I don't know what it's like where you're teaching, but here in the United States, most colleges are going to distance learning, online learning, some type of hybrid type course as well. This past spring semester of 2020, I developed what's called a general organic biochemistry class for our nursing majors. Now, our nursing majors can be all over the United States, and they don't have to be on campus per se. So what I did is I developed an entirely online chemistry class, both lecture and lab, to be online and not on campus at all. So I had students from all over the state of Michigan who were taking this class. They never once stepped on campus to participate in the class. The lectures were online, the laboratory was online, they did the lab at their home. They actually did real labs, not theoretical labs, but real labs with their hands. They did those at their home with common household chemicals. The quizzes were online, the exams were online, the discussion is online, everything is online. Well, I wondered, how am I going to promote or do problems? As you know, chemistry in any science is going to have lots and lots and lots of questions and problems. And so I wanted a medium to help show students how I was solving these problems. Now, a common technique that you see is you'll have a camera on a piece of paper and you see a hand writing on that piece of paper trying to solve or attempting to solve that problem. And I think that's a great way to do it. However, what was lacking was the personal interaction. I think most of us can agree that the reason we get into teaching is for the interaction that is going to occur. And I think it's very important that these students see nonverbal communication. And so thus, a friend of mine, a super dear friend of mine about 10 years ago, told me about this thing called the light board. And that's what I'm going to describe to you today, is going to be the light board. I'm going to show you the construction of how I built my light board. Now, you can buy commercial light boards and they're very expensive, but I built my own. I enjoy building things with my own hands. And so I built my own at a fraction of the cost. I'm going to then discuss with you some of the great things about this light board, and then some of the shortcomings of the light board, some of the problems that are associated with it. There isn't much on pedagogy on the light board. Around 2011, I believe, was the first documented use of this thing called a light board from a professor at the University of Northwestern. And so it hasn't been around much, and it certainly hasn't been studied much. But I'm quite certain, as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, that there will be a lot of education research on the use of a light board. And so that's basically going to be my talk. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some of the videos I've made with this light board. There's also, as I stated, it's a video medium, and so there's going to be, there was quite a bit of video editing for this process. Once again, that's going to be one of the downsides of using the light board is going to be some of the video editing that is used for this. All right. So once again, I'm humbled and honored to be able to talk to you folks about this fairly new technology of how to teach courses at a distance, or how to record some videos for possibly a flipped classroom. Okay? Now what I'm going to discuss is the construction of this light board. As I stated previously, you can buy these, and here in America, last time I checked, it's called learningglass.com is a place where you can buy these light boards. And the price of these light boards were somewhere around $2,000. I think that's what they started at. A lot of money, at least for our university, and certainly for my department. And so what I did is I constructed my own light board. And how I made this was I purchased a piece of plexiglass, all right? And it's about 48 inches by 48 inches. There's a frame down below, a wood frame that I built to hold it up. These sides here, what they are is they're actually what's called pipe insulation. So if you have a pipe that's carrying hot water, you're going to want to insulate that pipe such that the water stays warmer. And so what I did is I purchased these pipe insulations. They're very cheap. And the reason I use them is as I take these off, what you'll see is you'll see some ribbon, some strip lighting. All right, so there's some strip lighting here that's taped to this piece of plexiglass, or polyacrylic it's also called as well. Now, when I purchased the glass, or the plexiglass, the first thing I did is I took a Bunsen burner or a butane torch, and I did what was called flame polish the edge. So let me repeat that. I flame polish the edge. So when this plexiglass is cut, it has a very rough surface. And what I wanted to do is I wanted the light to transmit through the glass. All right. So I'll shut the light off real quick, and you'll see what happens with that. Oops. So there I shut the light off, and I'll just turn it on ever so slightly. Something like that. So I flame polished the plexiglass edge. I then purchased the strip lighting from Amazon. The strip lighting has just a little bit of UV light, such that when you write on it with a marker, it will fluoresce. I'll show you that in a few minutes. I know I haven't showed that yet, but I will. And I use this pipe insulation to keep the light all on the inside. Now, as I stated, the reason I made this is it's a lot cheaper. It was significantly cheaper. I have, just in the plexiglass, cost me $80. The strip lighting cost me about $20, and these cost me $1. So I have about $101 into this glass alone, into just simply the light board. I got a really good deal on this glass. Typically, this glass is going to cost about $500 for a piece about this size. I contacted somebody who works in the industry, and I said, this is what I'm looking for. If they happen to have a spare piece, then let me know. And about 5 to 6 months later, I got this piece of glass. And as I stated though, first thing I did was I flame polished all 4 edges. And I'll try to incorporate a picture of that flame polish edge, what it looks like. And when I mean flame polish edge, what it does is what you see on this side, you can also see on the side as well too, because I took a Bunsen burner or a butane torch and I got it really hot that you actually just see that glass just melt and it becomes very polished, such that the light transmits through. Now, this glass, it's plexiglass, it's very, very scratchable. It scratches very easily. You can see a scratch here, you can see a scratch there, you can see a scratch there. But what you can't see is all the little tiny scratches in it. So let me show you how scratched this piece of glass really is. And I'll do this by simply turning up the light. And so as I turn this light up even more, you can start to see all the tiny imperfections, all the scratches in this glass, right? Now the ribbon lighting, you can see tons of scratches over here. Yeah, I mean, they're just not coming out. You see scratches here. That might be just dirt. And so how I alleviate that is I simply turn down the light ever so slightly. And I just have it such that you can just barely see the light coming in through. There it's completely off. And here it comes on. Now I don't have to turn it up very much, as you'll see. I might turn it down just a little bit more. Oops, too much. There. Now, the markers I use are these what are called Expo Bright Sticks. And what they do is they sort of glow. And so let me turn that up just a little bit more. There. And you can see that a little bit better. That's green. I can also use yellow, which looks as such. I can also use pink. There's a pink one. Over here I've got a blue one. I'll show you real quick what the blue looks like. And so the blue, oops. Blue doesn't want to work right now. I'm sorry about that. And then there's the white. And what you can see is you can see that what happens is just the tiniest little bit of UV light here causes these markers to fluoresce. And if I turn it up a little bit more, you can see they glow a little bit. But if I turn the light up too much, the scratches dim my face and it becomes very cloudy. And so what I do is I simply just turn this down enough such it appears clear. To use a viewer such that my face appears clear, I can kind of get a judgment of how clear it is by my reflection. And you can see these colors. Now, when I want to remove these colors, I simply use a microfiber towel and they just erase off as such. And that's basically how the light board works. That's what I've done. So I have a base down here holding the plexiglass. Now I did not build the best base. I tend to hold this when I write so I don't break the plexiglass. I flame polished the edge, and as I stated, I'll show a picture of that flame polished edge for you. I then attached strip lighting around the edge on all 4 sides, so there's strip lighting coming down here as well. There's some strip lighting along the bottom of it and the sides, and then I use what's called pipe insulation such that you can see here I wanted to keep the light in the board and nowhere else. And so I just block that light as such it just stays in the board. Next, what I'll talk about is I'll talk about the studio. How do I record this? Where do I record this? Some of the good things and some of the bad things. Okay? Now, I'll mention this later in this video, but one of the problems with the light board is the studio. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I want to give you an idea of the studio that I have. So in front of you is the light board with the frame. And off over here is going to be a studio light. Over here, I've got another studio light. And obviously, once again, this is going to be the light board. Now, what I've done to make the colors appear more brilliant and to give sort of a dull background is I have placed a black cloth behind me. And I've actually stretched it out very tightly. Now, I have just placed the light board onto a plank with a couple of sawhorses right down here. I got some sawhorses there. And that keeps up to about the proper height. Now, one thing that you can kind of see in this video is you can sort of see a reflection coming off the front surface of the light board. And how I've eliminated that as much as I can is I've also placed a black cloth behind or in front of the light board. So I have a black cloth in front of the light board. And then I've also placed a black cloth behind the light board. Now the one in front of the light board, so now this camera is at the front of the light board. I would be standing back here and I'll show you. Here's where I would be standing giving a talk. And so in front of the light board, I have a black cloth as well. And what this does is this eliminates any front surface reflections from the plexiglass. Now my camera is going to be placed right there. So there's my camera. And I'll zoom in real quick and you can see the camera there. All right. And the camera that I have is going to be a Blackmagic 4K cinema camera. That's the camera that I have. I'll show you the box quickly. And so this is the camera that I have. You don't have to get exactly this camera. It's a fairly expensive camera. You don't have to get one to that standard at all. Another thing I do for the sound is I have an external microphone. And so I will run an external microphone from here to the camera. Now the distance between the light board and the camera is quite large. I would say this distance is going to be anywhere between 3 and 4 meters. So it's a very large distance. Now what determines that, or what dictates that, is going to be the lens on the camera. When I purchased this camera, I purchased it to make videos of chemical demonstrations in the lab. I did not intend for it to be used for this purpose. Because the price of the camera, and especially the price of the lens was very expensive, I chose to just stick with this situation, or with this scenario that I have. And so, as I stated, I'll be standing behind the light board giving lectures. The camera is in front, and I have the 2 studio lights to help show myself teaching better. As I've stated, and I'll state it many times, one of the benefits of this light board is that they get to see the nonverbal communication of the lecturer. Because of this great distance and the size and the space, it's very hard to find space on campus to set up this light board. Space at our campus is very valuable because we don't have a large campus. So I have set this light board up in my house in the basement. And that serves a couple purposes. It's because it's very dark down here. I don't want ambient light. So any windows, I happen to have a window back behind me, I've got that all boarded up such that ambient light cannot leak through. If we had some ambient light, what would happen is that you'd see the reflection off this front surface. And that would be a major problem. And so I've blocked all ambient light. I'm in the process of working on this basement a little bit, and so I've got some wood and some 2x4s up, and I've placed anything dark I possibly can to prevent these front surface reflections. Right now you may be able to see a reflection from a light behind there. And so you have to be very thoughtful and conscious as to how you set your Lightboard studio up. As I stated, I am fairly new at Spring Arbor University. I don't have a lot of political clout to have such a large space for this Lightboard. And so I thought it best to set it up in my basement. My wife is also a teacher and has at times used this apparatus for her classes. And so there's a few things you have to consider when setting up your studio. The studio lights, I think, are extremely important. I think a microphone is extremely important. I did several tests, several experiments on using the Lightboard without a microphone, and there was no way they could hear my loud voice. And so I got myself a microphone. It is not a wireless microphone. It is wired, and that's a lot less expensive. It's much cheaper to go that way. And I just ran a long cord all the way to my camera back there. My camera has a microphone in or an audio input into it. The black curtains are extremely important as well, because I want to have a nice clean background. As you'll see in the videos I've shown you, I have a fairly clean background. If I remove that black curtain, you'll see all kinds of reflections coming off the front surface, and that really degrades the video quality of the video. And the whole idea of this video is you want it to be clear. You want to have your face portrayed quite well. You want the data that's put onto the board portrayed quite well, and you want your students to be able to hear you very well. I have, in the last 6 months, in the last year, I have made in excess of 100 videos, and I've not gotten one complaint on the quality of the videos that I've made. And I will show you, and I'll put links to several of my videos in this recording for you. You're welcome to look at each and every one of them, and you're welcome to reach out to me as to how I made this video. But once again, I think the studio lights are very important, the microphone is very important, and the black curtains are very important. Now the quality of the camera and lens, that's up to you folks. That's up to you. I happen to get a 4K camera. I don't record in 4K, I record in 1080. That's the best that my computer can do to edit these videos. I have a nice tripod because it is an expensive camera. But this is the setup, the studio that I set up this Lightboard in. It does take a lot of space, as I stated. It takes a tremendous amount of space. There's another another thing that you have to consider when making one of these Lightboards, is that what are you going to do with the image? The image has to be flipped horizontally. There are three ways that you can do this. One is you can set up a mirror so you can record the reflection coming off the mirror. That's one way you can flip it horizontally. Another way is to use the software in the camera. That's one way. And another way is to use the software on the editing program, and that's what I use. And I'll talk about that in a little bit later when I explain to you that when I write on this board, what you see is the mirror image, the horizontal flip of what I'm writing. I'm not writing backwards. I'm writing what appears to be left to right for me. But for the viewer and the observer, you'll see the mirror image of that. Now, that lends to another issue with this Lightboard, is that I don't know how you could do this for a live audience. I set this simply for recordings. I do not set this up for a live audience. I set it entirely up for a recording, such that the students can view the recording
at their own time. Like I said, I don't know how you could set this up for a live video or a streaming. I set it entirely up to record it. I upload it to YouTube such that the student can watch it at any time at their leisure. And so once again, this is my recording studio. It's in my basement. I'm sorry it's a mess. We moved here. I've been working on the basement to try to get it finished a little bit. And so it's mostly used for storage. But as I stated, the distance between the light board and the camera is about 3 to 4 meters. And so it is a very large space that it takes up. And so you have to consider that if you're going to be making a light board. Another consideration you have to take into account is the portability of the light board. This thing is not very portable. I have set this up about a year ago and it has not moved. It is very problematic to move the light board. I don't want to break the glass. And as you saw, I have some scratches, but the little scratches you don't see. The large scratch, such as here, you do see that scratch. So I want to eliminate the number of scratches as much as possible. I don't want to scratch this board because that will hurt in the video quality or the optical quality of the glass. And I want my students to be able to read what I write quite well. All right. Next, what I'll discuss is how I flip that image.
Now that I've talked quite a bit about this light board, I've talked about the equipment I use, I've talked about why I use it, I've talked a lot about this light board. Let me show you how I use the light board. And right away, you're going to see a problem. And then I'll talk about how I fix this problem. So to start out with, as I mentioned, I have a large piece of plexiglass here. It doesn't have to be plexiglass, it can be any type of glass. And I have some type of lighting in here. And the light has just a little bit of ultraviolet to it, just a little bit. And I use these Expo Bright marker sticks. And as you'll see in them, they do start to fluoresce or glow. So that happens to be green. This is yellow, which to me looks very similar to green, but there's a slight difference. There's pink. Pink really stands out very nicely. And there's blue. There's another color we can use. We can use blue that's a tad dark. And then lastly, we can use white. So it becomes white. And what I use to clean this, I use a microfiber towel, and this will clean it off without really scratching it a whole lot. Now, after heavy use on the light board, I have a squirt bottle here that contains deionized water and just the tiniest amount of liquid dish soap, just a little bit. And after heavy use on the light board, I will clean this. So I do it typically about once a week, depending upon how much I use the light board. Now, I sort of alluded to that there's sort of a mistake, not really a mistake, but you should have already figured out what some of the problems is. So with this light board. So let me start with, let's say I'm going to write my name, for instance. So my name is Mike Neidiger, and I work at Spring Arbor University. Now, as you can see, it appears backwards to you. And so there's a couple of tricks that you can use to alleviate this problem. One is going to be, you can set up a mirror and get the reflection. The second is you can change a setting on a camera, which you can do that as well. Or lastly, what you can do, and what I do, is I use an actual program called VideoPad to flip the image, all right? So I'll show you what that looks like after we flip the image. Now, what I have done is I have flipped the image. I typically use a program to flip the image. The program I use is VideoPad. There's all kinds of them out there. Macintosh has one. I use a PC. My wife uses, it's called DaVinci is the program she uses. She uses it on her Mac. She likes that. Now the reason I typically use a computer program to flip the image is I typically use that exact same computer image to type in some type of text into this video. And so I usually do it all in one program. I flip it in VideoPad, and I can include text, I can change the sound, I can change the visual quality, and so I just decided to do it that way. And as I stated, there are other ways to flip this image horizontally. As I stated, you can use a mirror, so you can take the reflection off the mirror. That will do a horizontal flip. Some cameras in the programs can flip this. Or as I stated, you can simply use a video editing software. And as I stated, I use what's called VideoPad. I'm not trying to promote anyone. That's just what a colleague of mine used and was familiar with it and helped me out trying to produce my very first video. Now you can erase this, as I stated, with a microfiber cloth as such, and it doesn't do a perfect job, but it does a very good job while doing this. Now, this gets us to another kind of an issue with these light boards. It's very difficult, at least I would find it very difficult, how you would do this for a live audience. Because I imagine that the camera would be the audience, and they would not actually be able to watch you live right on this video, on this light board, because they're going to see the reverse. Your writing is going to have to be backwards. And that makes it a very difficult medium to work with if you're dealing with a live audience, at least a person-to-person or face-to-face audience. Now, if they're off-site or they're watching a large monitor, then, and you have a camera that can flip your image horizontally, then it could certainly be done that way. But at Spring Arbor University, where Professor Chan and myself work, we do a lot of face-to-face lecturing. I mean, that's why I can't speak for Dr. Chan, but I can only speak for myself that that's why I got into teaching, was to help students, to interact with students, and for the most part, I really enjoy talking to my students. So I don't see this being a very good tool for face-to-face lectures. I see this as a much more important tool for online, is where I virtually use this tool exclusively, is online. And I have no desire to use this in a face-to-face scenario. And so I teach, as I stated, I teach a general organic biochemistry class for nursing majors, and that's entirely online. And the lecture portion, I use this light board. So if I'm trying to teach stoichiometry, or I'm trying to teach dilutions, or any nomenclature, pick it. For the most part, this is a very, very useful tool for that medium, for trying to teach online, and certainly for teaching science. Typically, science is kind of a dry, not a lot of personality subject, and so I favored this over just writing on a piece of paper and having a camera down, because I want the students to see my expressions. I think the nonverbal communication is very important, and making it more human, more real, more live when these students are participating and taking this class. Now, there are a few areas where the light board also is problematic there as well too, because of the flipping of the image. And that would be in organic chemistry, where you're dealing with chirality, you're dealing with direction, because you have to flip that direction. I also taught a physics course last spring semester, this past spring semester, and due to the COVID-19 pandemic, I had to transition all that to being online, and I talked about electromagnetism in that physics course. And in electricity and magnetism, you do a lot of cross products, and the orientation wouldn't work well on the light board. So what I actually did for that is I recorded myself on a whiteboard. The reason I'm pointing this way is I have a whiteboard in my basement as well too. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, we turned our basement into really just teaching studios, and we've left it up that way. But I did most of my teaching when it deals with directional or multiple or doing cross products of vectors or chirality. I did all that on a whiteboard, not on a light board, because you've got to flip that image. And it's hard for me to think about, and it's hard for students to think about having to flip that image. So those would be a couple areas where I don't think the light board would be very helpful. I've been reading some papers about teaching students about Chinese language on light boards, so it doesn't have to just be used for science and math. All right. When I come back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a bit about what I know about the pedagogy of this light board. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the pedagogy. As I stated earlier, there is not much pedagogy on using the light board. This came out in 2011 by a professor at University of Northwestern Universities. I believe where the first paper came out in 2011. There wasn't much research done on it. I don't know if there is. There might be due to the coronavirus. I'm not really sure. So this is the closest I can come up with the pedagogy of using a light board. Basically, I just came up with the pros and the cons for using a light board. Some of the pros is that you have a good interaction with students. You get to engage them a little bit more, right? You get to see the facial expressions of the professor while they attempt to write or while they're writing on one of these boards. It's just, I've watched several videos on YouTube, and when it's just a camera on top of a piece of paper, it doesn't really show itself or render itself to be very helpful. I mean, I understand, but this makes it much more personable. It's much more engaging. You have a much better interaction with the students than just a piece of paper. Even in a traditional classroom, what you see is you see the back of the professor. What the students see is they see the back of the professor as they're writing on the board. They don't get to see the professor's or the teacher's facial expression while they're writing on the board. All right. It's very good for memory, or it's better for memory, I should say, in that if you can combine the audible or auditory with the visual simultaneously as what you're seeing right now, right here, that's going to enhance with the memory. You can also combine PowerPoint and any handwritten annotations as well. So in some of these programs, you can overlap a PowerPoint and actually have the person describing it by using one of these light boards as well too. There's very little training. Help if I could spell. There's very little training that has to be used in this. It's just a light board, you turn it on, and you just start writing. The post-production or the editing is fairly simple as well too. For this video that will be slightly less than an hour,
I will have spent probably an hour and 20, hour and 30 minutes editing this video, putting it all together. It's very simple to do the editing of it. Also, and so the editing is really not that hard, so the post-production in this is really quite simple. I'm making sure I have not missed anything on my notes. It complements well with verbal explanations of diagrams. So there have been times when I have made diagrams on this light board, such as maybe explaining an electric field or explaining a chemical process, in which I can draw the diagram on this board and explain it to the students, and they get to see my facial expressions, which I think once again really helps with memory and cognitive processes, where they're understanding this stuff so much better when they get to see the facial expressions of the professor. So I think that's really nice that it complements that. Now we have some cons, some difficult things with this, and it's the writing. You have to write backwards, or you have to use a program to flip. Now, if you're going to use a program to flip, that doesn't necessarily help with the video quality. If you could reflect off a really nice clean mirror, that would be even better. So I can look at the quality of when I flip this video compared to the raw video, and it's not nearly the same. It's not movable, so it's very stationary. You really can't move this thing around. You have to move, and that becomes sort of a problem. It's very stationary. As a result of that, it doesn't lend itself very good for face-to-face classroom. It just is not very good for face-to-face classroom. Because you may have one teacher that wants to use it, but another teacher that doesn't want to use it. I guess another pro for this is it's helpful for online learning, or flipped classroom, or remote learning, whatever you want to call it. That's where it would be very good. But for the cons, as I stated before, I really have a hard time seeing how this would be beneficial to face-to-face classrooms. It just, because of the writing has to be backwards. And so I just don't see it working out very well for face-to-face classrooms. And that's probably why there hasn't been much research done on it. Next, the studio size. I mean, we have a limited amount of space in a classroom. We don't have an infinite amount of space. And you got to work with other people. And as I stated, in this studio right now, we're looking at about 4 meters is about the length of the studio. You go out this side, I'm about 6 foot, so I'm about 180 centimeters. And this is well over 2 meters. So you're talking about 4 meters in one dimension and at least 2.5, 3 meters in another dimension. So it takes up a lot of space and a lot of size. And I just don't, like I said, I have this set up in my basement because I got the room right here to set up such a studio. I don't know if I would at my university. I tried that, and I was going to put it in the back of a classroom I taught in, and it just did not work. And so you got this size issue going on. It's good for short videos. Because you don't have a lot of space to write on this. And also, erasing it is very problematic. The longer this marker stays on this board, it's much more difficult to erase. So you won't see this, I'll edit it out, but when I erase this, it's going to take several minutes to erase what I've written on here once it dries. What you've seen so far in the video is that I don't let the marker sit very long, and thus it erases very quickly. So that tends to lend to short videos simply because of the size and the time it takes to erase the ink or the marker off this board.
And one thing I've not mentioned a whole lot is you have to be mindful of your clothes. And you wouldn't think of that, but imagine if I had a shirt that had a logo on it, that had a name on it, right? Once I flip that, then that backwards. And so I typically do these videos with a dress shirt, what I would wear while I'm actually lecturing in the classroom. And so that's one thing you have to be mindful of. And just before I record this is the summer, and I typically don't wear these shirts in the summers, and I was wearing a t-shirt that had a name or a brand on it, and so I had to take it off and put on a shirt that when I flip this portion of the video, it won't appear backwards. All right. So once again, I'm sorry I can't talk more specifically about the pedagogy of using a light board, but there's some issues with that because you have something that's online, which I haven't seen much pedagogy on the online instruction, certainly in the sciences, and you have a new technology. So what I came up with is the pros, why I like the light board, and the big thing is I really like that interaction. I think it's so valuable and helpful for the students to see my face and my interaction. It makes it much more personable for the students. But then you also have some cons, and I really think the biggest cons is going to be the stationary, the face-to-face, and the sheer size of the studio. Another one I didn't mention that I kind of tend to forget about for a con because I built this myself is this is very expensive. Now I have seen some very small light boards made by a company called Learning Glass, and I'm not promoting them, that just happened to be one place where I looked at. And a small one was about $2,000. That's not including the lights. These lights are very cheap lights. I think I paid less than $20 for these studio lights. And then the camera, the tripod, the microphone, it all starts to add up quite a bit. Now I think a light board, you can get a 4x8, so that would be 4 feet by 8 feet. So that would be a little over a meter tall and about 2.5 meters long, and I think they're about $10,000 to $12,000 US dollars. So they can be very, very expensive, but you got to have the size to set this thing up, and you don't want to move it. And that becomes kind of a problem. Space on most universities is very limited and very valuable, and so you have some issues there. If you have any questions at all about the light board, how I set it up, how I enjoy it, some of the things I've learned from it, you're more than welcome to interact with me by email. I'll Skype with you, FaceTime with you. I'll do anything I possibly can to help you with this type of technology. I do have a YouTube channel, which is called Nursing Chemistry. And you're more than welcome to come and look at that YouTube channel I have. I have about 110, 115 videos of, most of them are of this light board. And so you're welcome to look at Nursing Chemistry. If you want to borrow some of my ideas, by all means, go ahead and use some of my ideas. That's perfectly great. You'll see stuff in there in chemistry. You'll see stuff in there in physics. You'll see lots of stuff there. And most of it is using this light board. All right. I hope this was beneficial and useful for you. Once again, I am honored that Dr. Chan even thought of me for this. Just to help out fellow teachers is an amazing honor. I wish I could meet you and talk to you, but we live in different times now. And so once again, if you need any help at all on any of this, feel free to reach out to me. And once again, my name is Mike Neidiger, and I hope you have a good and blessed day.